infra, in other words within, infra-particle intelligence. Now, if you take the idea of X-Tech seriously, then given that in our universe, our observable universe, there are trillions of stars, right? That's the big reality. And our universe is now measured at 13.7 billion years old. And our solar system, our star with its planets, is only about 4.6 billion years old. So that means there are out there probably trillions of second or third generation stars that are billions of years older than we are. And let's say a lot of them, most of them have planets, maybe a tenth of those. The temperature is such, they're not too close or too far from their sun, their star, so that water is in liquid form. So hence life, assume life then is commonplace, it's just everywhere in the universe, and that a certain percentage of those end up being intelligent and then scientific, and then they create artificial intelligence, and then the dominant form of intelligent life on the planet switches from biological to technological. Okay? And so these machines, if you like, these massively intelligent machines, then realize they have the potential of using X-Techs, so they can scale right down. And remember, the smaller you go, the faster, the more performant, right? Smaller is faster, in the form of a slogan. So for all we know, there may be, and here's the punchline, but it's logical, it may sound crazy the first time you've heard it, but here's the punchline, maybe there are whole civilizations inside elementary particles. It makes sense, if you take X-Tech seriously. Anyway, it's one of my speculations. So I'm somewhat cynical that the effort for SETI, S-E-T-I, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, using the technology of receiving radio waves, radio signals from advanced civilizations. In my view, given that the civilizations out there are billions of years older than we are, very probably they are tiny. And for all we know, they may be everywhere, and too tiny for us to detect, so we don't detect them. But anyway, thinking about the possibility of SIPI, S-I-P-I, I think is worth doing. All right. Okay. So other tabs, artificial brains. That was my research field. It still is to some extent, because I have to write a book about that, which I'm doing this year. Artificial brains, and subtitle, an evolved neural net module approach. So I still have somewhat of an interest in that field. So a year or two back, I and a good friend, we guest edited the Planet's first special issue in an academic journal on artificial brains. So some of the articles from that special issue, especially summarizing artificial brain research projects around the world, kind of summary, are in that tab, so artificial brains. Okay, now just quickly a few minutes on each of the Sageism. What's that? A sage, I define somebody to, has four properties. Firstly, is an alpha, so IQ in the top 1%, in the top percentile of the population. 2, PhD, has a PhD. 3, has ideas. And 4, writes books about those ideas. So somebody who satisfies those 4 properties, I define to be a sage. Okay? And people like that are 1 in 1,000. They're unusual and precious to an economy. Now, if China, for example, if it could be fully educated, it would have not 1.3 billion people, it would have 1.3 million sages, right? That's a whole city. That's the population of a city. So imagine a whole city's worth of such people, of sages. That's the potential of China. It's China's average IQ of 105, which puts it a little smarter than the Europeans, Russians, Americans, at 100. Well, let me give you the world IQ map because it's sort of interesting. I lived in 7 countries. I'm a 7-country multi. M-U-L-T-I. A multi is somebody who has lived in more than one culture. So I'm a 7-country multi. And my first country, well, I'll give you the list. Australia, where I grew up. Britain, I have a British passport, so I'm an EU, European Union citizen. And then Holland, Belgium, I picked up French and German and Dutch. And then Japan, lived 7, 8 years. And then America, 5 years. And so far 6 years in China. Now, in my first country, Australia, they have the dumbest people in the world. And I'm giving you the world IQ map here. The Australian blacks are called Aborigines, and their IQ test score, average IQ, is 60. Next, the African blacks at 70. Next, a great swathe of humanity, the Native Americans, North, Central, South. The North American Arabs through Middle East, including India, all of them at 85. Okay? And that at 100 by definition, because they're the people who created these IQ tests, the Europeans and the Russians, so 100. And at 105, the smartest large group in the world are the Northeast Asians, so Chinese, Koreans, Japanese, 105. Now, from statistics, if you take the bell curve, the IQ bell curve, and you shift it up just 5 points, that has a huge impact on the number of genii that culture produces. It's now like 5 IQ points on average, smarter than the next group. So the potential of China, I see, is just fabulous. And that's one of the reasons why I'm living here. I haven't talked about that. Well, 2 main reasons. One is purely economics. Because China is a poor third world country, still growing very fast, fastest growing country in the world, but still it's still relatively poor. It hasn't yet reached the democratic threshold of $6,000 to $8,000 per year per person to create high enough proportion of its population being middle class to push for democracy. But it's coming. I calculate from principles of transitology that probably China will democratize within the decade. Probably before 2020, China will be a democracy. Okay. So by using my American savings, I can live far longer at a much cheaper rate, and that in turn allows me to to retire earlier. So I'm now freer earlier, whereas in the US, for example, a lot of professors, they, partly for financial reasons, partly because they may just love their work, but finance comes into it. A lot of them choose not to retire until they're in their 70s, right? So they're in a sense not free to do totally what they like or change careers or whatever, the way I've done. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is I'm hoping, expecting, once China has democratized in this decade, the 2010s decade, the teens decade, that in the 2020s and 2030s, if I'm still alive, I'm hoping China will be the most exciting place on the planet, and I want to be part of it. I feel I have so much to teach China, but I can't do it now because of the brutal dictatorship of the Chinese government. So long as I stay in English, I should be okay, because the Chinese government doesn't care about non-Chinese speaking people because they have such minimal impact. Okay, Sageism, what is that? Okay, so you've probably heard of terms sexism, so discrimination against a particular sex, usually women. Racism, discrimination against race. Ageism, discrimination against age. Well, sageism I define to be, it's my word, to be discrimination against the sages, against the intellectuals. Now, intellectual, that's 5 syllables, that's too much of a mouthful. So, anti-intellectualism, 9 syllables, that's crazy. So, I just coined this term, sageism, 3 syllables, much easier, slips off the tongue more readily, and it's self-explanatory, I hope. So Sageism is discrimination against intellectuals. For example, why is it in many, many countries our media is geared towards the peakers? That's another term, let me explain a bit. Here is the IQ bell curve, the distribution of IQ scores in a population. Now, between -1 and +1 standard